Hello there and welcome to this channel. My name is Dick van Oeveren, and in this second video of, second series of videos around Aruba data center networking, I would like to show you what happens if you make a configuration change on the CLI of a CX switch. What happens in Aruba Fabric Composer? Typically, um, if you want to manage your data center networks, you would use Aruba Fabric Composer to do all the orchestration, management, all the stuff around CX switches. But you might have a situation where you want to make a change on the CLI, or maybe you have a third-party application that's running some API interaction with the switches, and you're pushing some stuff. Some configuration to the switches. So what would be the behavior of Aruba Fabric Composer? Um, just to enlighten you on that is that a tip. So the on the CX switch, in a day on CX in general with Aruba Fabric Composer, the configuration on the switch is leading, which means that if you make a configuration change on CLI or outside of Aruba Fabric Composer to the switch, Aruba Fabric Composer will absorb those changes, and it will make those changes reflected in the Aruba Fabric Composer configuration. Now what you can also do is if the change was unintentional, you can also use Aruba Fabric Composer to restore a previous configuration using checkpoints, or maybe to reconcile the data. So these are all options that you can do in AFC. But in any case, the configuration on the switch is leading, and AFC follows that configuration. So that's what I'm going to show you. I would also like to show you another new feature that we have in Aruba Fabric Composer, which is the CLI editor. And so with the CLI editor, what we can do is in Aruba Fabric Composer, we can actually edit the configuration, the CLI configuration, using something similar to what we have with NetEdit, with like the multi-editor in NetEdit, and we can do that in Aruba Fabric Composer as well. And that's also something I would like to show you. So let's get to it. Here we are in Aruba Fabric Composer. Let's go into the visualization. You can see that there's a spine leaf fabric, lots of things configured in here. The VRFs, you can see VPNs configured, so a lot of stuff configured here. Now, before I go into the CLI, let me show you a couple of things that are really affecting the way AFC copes with the CLI changes. Let me just first go into the system settings here, and you can see a switch pole interval here at the bottom, 1 minute and 30 seconds. This parameter is used by AFC to check every 90 seconds if there's a configuration change on the switch. If there is a configuration change, AFC will absorb that information and it will put it in its configuration. Okay. And there's also another setting which is relevant, and there's a different location where to find that settings. It's in the fabric. If I go into edit, you can see here this auto save interval. What that means is that AFC will automatically save the running configuration every 10 minutes, right? So if you would make a change in CLI, and if you are not saving that in the CLI, Aruba Fabric Composer will do that every 10 minutes for you. So in this case, because it's set to 600 seconds, right? And that's the minimum value. And so what you will see is when I do something in the CLI, you'll probably see that it won't be reflected in the startup configuration immediately. Now, before I create a checkpoint, because that's also part of the demo, is that I want to revert the configuration back to what it was before I made the CLI changes. So before I make that checkpoint, let me show you the running configuration and the startup configuration. So show startup configuration. The idea is for me to create a VRF blue, and within that VRF create an IP interface, create an SVI. There's only one VRF at this moment, and I will be creating VLAN 1300. You can see that there's no IP interface for VLAN 1300 yet. And when I scroll back up, there is also no VLAN 1300. Okay, so that's the startup config. If I show the running config, it's the same. So we only have the GVA VRF, no VRF blue, no VLAN 1300, and there is obviously, if there's no VLAN 1300, there cannot be an interface VLAN 1300 either. So from a configuration perspective, we're in good shape and we are ready to create a checkpoint. For creating a checkpoint, I go into maintenance and then switch checkpoints. There are no checkpoints at this moment, and let's create one for that 8360. I can actually create checkpoints for all the switches for the whole fabric, but I just want to create a individual checkpoint for this 8360. Supply, and now it will create that checkpoint. There you go, successfully created. Once I've created that checkpoint, what I can do is I can actually check, go into the snapshots, and I can actually check whether there is a configuration difference between the checkpoint and the actual configuration on the switch itself. And you can see that there are no changes between the snapshot that I've created and the current switch configuration. It's all there. And so you can check out that configuration. Okay, let's move to the VRFs. You can see that there are three VRFs here: the data VRF, the default one, the management VRF, and a VRF that has been created. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a VRF on the CLI. So if I do show run VRF, you can see that there's this single VRF running. And let me create a VRF called VRF blue. Let's create a root distinguisher and a root target for EVPN. There you go. I'm not going to save it. I'm just going to keep it in the running config. Let's move back here. Let's do a refresh. And you can see that the VRF has been absorbed by Aruba Fabric Composer. The important to notice is that you would think that it takes 90 seconds before that information is absorbed by AFC, but it's it's a static timer that is set. So it might be that you are in the middle of configuring something, and then on AFC that timer is expired and it will obtain that information. So it might just take 5 seconds before AFC is updated, or it could take up to 90 seconds, right? It really depends where you are in the timer. And so, so you can see that VRF being imported into Aruba Fabric Composer. Now going back to the CLI, if I do a show running, and let's begin at blue, you can see that the VRF is there as well. And if I do show startup configuration, you can see that that VRF is still not in the startup configuration. And that's this 600-second timer interval that's being used by AFC. So after like 600 seconds, like 10 minutes, what AFC will do is will automatically save the running configs to the startup configs. So you don't see that, you don't see that at the moment, but you might see it later on in the demo. So I'll probably get back to that as well. Okay, let's get back to the VRF and go into the IP interfaces. There are no IP interfaces, and let me create one IP interface on the CLI. VLAN 1300 IP interface VLAN 1300. Let's attach it to the VRF, blue, and give it an IP address, 10.6.103.1. Let's set the IP MTU to a value, and also let's give it a description. VLAN 1300. Okay, and let's go back and do a refresh. Again, so this could take some time, up to 90 seconds, depending where you are on the timer. So let's refresh it a couple of times and see when it shows up. There you go. There it is. There's the SVI. It's been imported by AFC into the configuration. And let me just edit that. So for example, what I could do is, let me just change the IP address here. And maybe just give it a name. And then apply. And let's see what it has done here. VLAN 1300. There you go. So it also, when the configuration is created on the CLI, I can still use AFC to make more changes on that switch actually. Now let's check out the switch checkpoint and the snapshot. See whether we can spot any differences. And let's go there. Let's click on diff. There should be differences here, and you can see that depicted here below. So the green has been added. You can see that the VRF blue has been added. And there was a change in the VLAN configuration here. You can see that VLAN 1300 has been added, and the VLAN interface has been added here as well. Interface VLAN 1300. That configuration wasn't there before. So you can actually see what has changed by checking out the snapshot differences with the configuration, and that's a pretty cool feature. And then also going back to the CLI, let me just do a show running. We could do that because the VRF configuration is actually here at the top. You can see the running configuration. If I do a show startup, and remember that I didn't do a write config, right? So I didn't write any configuration from the CLI. You can actually see that VRF blue configuration is also in the startup config now. You probably won't see the VLAN interface. Let me just quickly check it. No, VLAN 1300, the SVI is not there yet. But like after 600 seconds, that information, that VLAN interface should be stored in the startup configuration as well. Okay, let me show you another cool feature that we have introduced in Aruba Fabric Composer 6.4, which is the configuration editor. What you can see here and what you actually can do here is you can make changes to the configuration through Aruba Fabric Composer. So let me just select the 8060 again. You can see the VRF information. You can see the VLAN information that I've added. All the cool stuff. Okay. Now what I will do is let me add an EVPN instance here. So I'm going to add that VLAN 1300 to to the EVPN. VLAN 1300. Let's set that to auto. And redistribute host route. Okay. What I can do is I can validate, and I can actually also create a checkpoint before applying. What it allows me to do is if I made a mistake or if I did something wrong, I can always restore that checkpoint. Okay, so let's do the validation first. And you can see that the validation was successful. And then what I can do is, well, before I apply it, let me show the EVPN configuration. You can see that VLAN 1300 is not in there. And let me just apply it here. And now it will be pushed to the switch. It created a checkpoint, and it should be in here as well. There you go. It's in there. And it should also be visible in AFC. And let's check that out. If I go into routing, EVPN, I should have an EVPN here. There you go. It's this one. And that's been added to the AFC configuration as well. That's pretty cool. Now I made a lot of changes here, and actually I don't want those changes to be, to be active. I really want my old configuration back. So I go into the checkpoints, and actually you can see this configuration edit auto checkpoint being created when I did the CLI edit in AFC. But actually what I want to do is I want to roll back this configuration here, this initial configuration, which did not have the VRF and the SVI configuration in there, and actually also not the EVPN configuration. So what I'll just do is I'll select that one and go into actions, go to rollback, and what I also want to do is copy the running configuration to the startup configuration after the rollback, because I also want to have that VRF information gone from that configuration. So hit the apply button, and now it will push that checkpoint back onto the switch. There you go, successfully applied. And if I go to the CLI, if I do show running, you can see that the blue VRF is gone, VLAN 1300 is gone, and there shouldn't be any VLAN interface 1300 as well in the running configuration. And actually that same should apply for the startup. No VRF blue, no VLAN 1300, and no SVI interface 1300. So we only have 1201, 1202, and 1200 here. So that's all working fine. And then finally, let's check whether AFC has also the correct information in here. And you can see that the VRF is gone as well. The blue VRF is gone. Let's check out EVPN. You can see that the EVPN for VLAN 1300 is gone as well. That's pretty neat. And that's it for now. Thanks for watching this video. Next up is, let me think, visibility, flow visibility. I will be showing you some really very cool stuff on the Pensando Services Manager and the ability to export the full flow data to an Elasticsearch. So I will be showing you a Kibana front end and some very nice graphical tools that can analyze the data that is sent by Pensando Services Manager to Elasticsearch. So be on the lookout for that video. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, hit the thumbs up button and hope to see you soon. Bye.